Welcome to Foresight Wednesday. My name is Joachim Skog. I'm Strategic Area Lead Future Innovations at Vinnova. And I'll be your guide in exploring alternative futures for the next 45 minutes. Foresight Wednesday is our monthly training camp in futures thinking, where we invite guests to talk about signs of change they've seen in the present that tells them something about a plausible or at least possible future. Since the start 4 years ago, this marks our 41st occasion actually for the Foresight Wednesday. And we've had almost 120 different futures being presented to us. The ability to talk about alternative futures is especially important to acquire in these days of exponential development and strong drivers of change. We see daily breakthroughs in technology, no matter if it's AI or quantum technology or synthetic biology, and combining those developments with climate change, geopolitical unrest, and other driving forces, that creates a perfect storm of uncertainty. And in this perfect storm of uncertainty, we need to stop trying to predict the future, but rather being prepared and train our ability to getting prepared to face whatever future that lies ahead of us. And when we train that ability, we need to make use of that ability to create that future together, because there's no one else creating the future for us. It's actually our task to do that. Today, our coaches in training this ability are Ylva Strander, Head of Department Systems Transformation at Vinnova. We have Niklas Laninge, CEO and psychologist, Nordic Behaviour Group, and Minna Sandberg, Director, SwenodeAI, normally in Silicon Valley, but today you're in Gothenburg, right? Welcome. So the rules of engagement in this game is really simple, actually. You each get 5 minutes to present your signs of change that tells you something about the future. And after those 5 minutes, we'll just have a short discussion reflecting on your presentation. Sounds fair?
Sounds good.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So first in line, Ylva Strander, please.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about a topic I call pivoting in politics. There's a Swedish saying, one is not a lesser person than to be able to change one's mind. It was an attempt to translate, man är inte sämre än att man kan ändra sig. And some would argue that change, or even pivoting, is a Swedish strength. The ability to pivot has actually built our industrial base in the past. So Sandberg from the beginning made steel, Ericsson made telegraph equipment, internationally Nokia made tires, Nintendo was a playing card company, Samsung was a trading company, and Twitter was a podcast platform. For a startup, pivoting is more the norm than an exception. But what makes a startup pivot? It could be lack of funds, it could be technological breakthroughs, but probably most of all, it's discovery of new facts. It could be facts about the market, facts about competition. But right now, at least in Sweden, we see an increased debate about pivoting in politics. So it could be around the use of masks during a pandemic, around the levels of immigration, around the energy mix, or the attitude towards the EU. Most Swedish parties, actually, when you think about it, have in the past decade made a 180 turn in key political issues. In an international context, of course, you have many examples, Donald Trump on Obamacare, Theresa May on Brexit, Angela Merkel on nuclear power. And yesterday I read that Trump, 9 months before the election, said in an interview that his threat to have the US leave NATO is more of a form of negotiation. So that's more than pivoting, I would say. It's more of a 360 turn. But what does the trend of pivoting in politics mean for society? I mean, some groups, for example, go very quickly from years of climate change denial to climate nihilism, from we have no problem to it's too late to solve the problem. Sweden went quickly from decades of neutrality, maybe, and disarmament to full force NATO and 2+% of GDP investment into defense after, of course, the Russian aggression in February 2022. But what does this mean in a world of political volatility? When even European political parties are less about ideology, more about branding and communication, maybe. One example, in the Danish election in 2022, 53% of voters actually voted for a new party, a party that they hadn't voted for before. Before the campaign started, 66% were unsure of what to vote for. And country is now led by a coalition that no one really expected beforehand. So is this change the ability or the tendency to pivot? Is it a sign of weakness or even populism? Or is it a sound development in an increasingly complex and fast-moving world, like you described, Joachim? Is it weakening democracy? Is it increasing the mistrust in politicians? If they say one thing before the election and then they do another thing after. In Sweden, we have an expression called a betrayed debate. It's pretty strong words. So I would say it depends. If a politician knows that something is wrong and they still argue for it, it's populism. If they are ill-informed or new facts have been presented, it's a totally different story. Now, when is a good time to pivot in politics? Is it when facts build up? Or is it when public frustration builds up? Or is it when things just prove to be much more complex and difficult than they seemed a few months ago? And what does it take to seemingly overnight go from one position to another? Actually, if you think about it, when was the last time you changed your mind about something fundamental? It's really difficult. It takes bravery, it takes humility, it takes an openness and a constant search for new facts. And in fact, that is what science is built on. Testing a hypothesis, rejecting it if it doesn't hold. And I would say that that's what you want politicians to do, to upgrade their opinions based on new facts. The opposite, being resistant to new facts, is worse. It's like sticking to a dying business model. So I would argue that we need more entrepreneurial discovery in decision making, and we need to give leaders who change their minds a chance and credit, maybe. If we could avoid politicizing this fact finding and still hold opportunistic pivoters that act on trends accountable, we'd be in a better position. But I'm afraid that we don't do that today. We don't allow people in the public debate to change their minds. So I would personally rather have nimble and decentralized leadership that act on judgment rather than long-term planning paired with top-down decision-making. And what does the future look like, you would probably ask. As always, it is actually up to us. So let's contribute to a debate climate where change is allowed. And maybe start with changing your own mind about something today. Maybe even here at Sweden Innovation Days, something you hear will make you pivot. Thank you.
Thank you. I love the fact how you take a concept from the startup scene and translates that into the political scene. Really interesting. And another thing I just reflected upon is that you mentioned how courage is needed in order to pivot. And just thinking about within Foresight, there's this saying that it's important with strong opinions, but lightly held. Because you might have a really strong opinion about something, but given the pace of change, we also need to be like brave enough to say that, yes, I know, I said that yesterday. Today, I know more, or I know different. But one thing I'm thinking about is that what is it like for citizens being like listening to politicians that pivot? What's required from us in order to not feel like the politicians are what's the English saying? What's the translation of vända kappan efter vinden? Like just turning whatever direction the wind is blowing, the politician turns that way. But in fact, it's politicians, in this future, it's politicians being brave. But what is required, do you think, from us as citizens in this world to make that as a power rather than not being a...
Yeah, I think it requires an openness as well, right? So I was thinking about this. Is it? I mean, the fact that a lot of people change parties, at least in Denmark, is that a sign of them, the voters changing opinions, or is it really the politicians changing opinions? And it could be both. So I think you need to be open. You need to not be too harsh to politicians that change their minds on the right basis. But you have to be a bit aware, of course, not to accept any lies in a campaign that someone knows is wrong, right?
And perhaps that's also underlines the fact that we all need to train our ability when it comes to futures thinking and think that, well, we might have to change. Do you have any reflections?
No, just to tag along on that note, I mean, as a voter, to really practice one's ability to see, do I see a political pivot here because of like populist tendencies, or is this actually like a pivot that I really like when regardless of who's doing it? Like, is this a fact-based pivot? And in order to sort of like see the differences, because I mean, at least according to me, I wouldn't want to live in a society where it's like reinforced and encouraged to like really have your pulse on the public opinion, to be like populist. I want, as you said, opinions to change when fact change, not like opinion change when it seems that could be beneficial for me in holding power. Yeah. But how do we like see the difference?
Yeah, really. Minna, do you have any reflections on this, what you just heard?
Yes, so I think it's very interesting, the possibilities of pivoting and also enhancing enhancing people to be brave enough to actually stand for their new insights and to pivot the politicians. I think it's very important. In comparing Sweden and the US, I would say that we are actually we're world famous for being able to pivot when it comes to sustainability questions. And my thoughts was that could we actually be pivoting? The politicians could pivot so we can be even better at new technologies like AI in a similar way.
True, super interesting.
You could argue that we need pivoting. We need much more action in a lot of areas. So let's allow it.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ylva. Super interesting, and looking forward to follow this foresight moving on. So next up, Niklas. What are we going to hear from you?
Yes. So just rearrange my slides. Check. Okay, technicians, can you go to the first? Thank you so much, tech team. Okay, so as Joachim said, I'm a psychologist by training, but I sort of work in the intersection where technology meets psychology. And today I have a very narrow prediction, or a very narrow sort of sign that something is about to change. But I think it also says something larger, what we're actually going through. And I call this prediction that this year will mark the end of SaaS companies as we know it. So most people out there use enterprise software as a service. I think we're on Zoom now, just to mention one of them. And software as a service has really boomed the last decade. But now I see that we're on to maybe we see something start to change in this very so far lucrative area. And again, I stand here as a psychologist, and as a psychologist I use a couple of principles for behavior change in order to navigate what does affect people's behavior? How does the present affect people's behavior? But I also use these assumptions when I sort of try to look into the future and see what's next. And just to make it super simple for you who are watching this, 3 principles. If you know these principles by heart, then I really believe that you can become a bit better in like navigating. Someone is changing my slides. I have a ghost in the shell somewhere. Just by knowing these simple principles, I believe that you can sort of navigate the future better. Because the future is about technology, but also human behavior. So first off, you need to know that humans in general navigate towards avoiding losses rather than reaching gains. So we are loss averse as a species, which makes us a bit hesitant to sort of look into what could be beneficial in the future. We'd rather navigate by seeing how can we avoid losses. And the second thing is that as a species, we are quite lazy. That's why webinars are so popular. It's much simpler to attend a webinar. Humans tend to follow the path of least resistance. But in all of this, we must also know that if external factors changes, if the tables is set in a different way, change can happen very quickly. And again, just to reference webinars and Zoom, this is exactly the kind of drivers that were in place during COVID. Once more. Someone is fumbling on my slides. So, change can happen very quickly, but that usually takes that external factors forces us to do so that these other 2 factors isn't in play. So, coming back to my prediction, okay, this year will mark the end of software as a service as we know it. Why? Well, of course, it's due to AI and also due to ruling economic circumstances. So when I say software as service companies, we mentioned Zoom, but most obviously it's probably Slack. I see a lot of people using Salesforce, Workday. There's a bunch of companies that during the zero-rate environment period has grown into tens of thousands of employees. They started with a very interesting core feature, but now they have bloated. Okay, so why will this happen? I have 3 simple examples. And if someone at the tech side won't spoil my slides, you ruin the element of surprise over there. Okay, so first off, economics, okay? For the past 1 or 2 years, we've seen that companies have stopped focusing on the top line growth, that is growth, gaining more users, gaining more customers, and rather they're getting fit. So they focus more on bottom line growth, which is a fancy way of saying companies are cutting their costs. And I guess it's more companies than just my little firm that have started to look into those monthly Slack bills, those bills that you get from Microsoft, those bills that you get from Salesforce, and start wondering, is it really worth paying like $12 per employee for another video meeting service? There's so many video meeting services now that we are bound to be a bit more skeptical about those invoices. So we are looking at our losses and we want to cut our losses. Second is, of course, generative AI. And generative AI, as most of you people know, have really lowered the bar thanks to tremendous technology, but also tremendously user-friendly interfaces. So now most of us, but probably mainly developers, have really seen an increase in their productivity. So the time that you go from, as a startup, from an idea to an actual product, thanks to Copilot services or conducting services, like we see Copilot if you are programming using, say GitHub, for instances, or ChatGPT, we've seen a tremendous increase in productivity. And this means that all those incumbents who build those amazing services, having tens of thousands of employees, isn't really that beneficial anymore, because a small team and a small startup powered by a couple of AI services can really make a challenging a competing service. And I stumbled upon this quote from a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. So his name is Shamat Palihapitiya. He runs a firm called Social Capital. And he had an interesting idea that he put forth on the internet. So he's saying that he's starting an incubator, and it's funded entirely by him. It's called 8090. So you go to 8090 and you tell what kind of enterprise software do you use, and he promised that they can deliver 80% of the feature at a 90% discount. So very ambitious, but he thinks that they can accomplish this by using AI services and offshoring. And I wouldn't, I really don't think he's wrong there. And by the start of this year, we saw another couple of smart group of people jumping on this trend. So 37 Signals is the company behind Basecamp, a very appreciated project management tool. In the end, at the start of this year, they launched another company called Once. And Once is supposed to be a challenger to enterprise software. And instead of having those subscription-related services, as SaaS is known to be, you only pay once, and they are challenging those incumbents. And the first incumbent that have sort of that they are aiming at is, of course, Slack. Slack, a very appreciated chat service, but it's gone bloated, it's too expensive. So now the team at 37 Signals will launch their own competing service at a fraction of the cost, just as 8090. So don't be surprised if we see a whole completely different landscape when it comes to SaaS services in a couple of years. And I just want to mention that if you do enjoy this kind of conversation, if you do enjoy a conversation around technology and the human behavior, please follow me on Substack. I love to have a conversation on that platform because it's very nice and friendly. So hope to see you there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Niklas. I mean, and I can only add to, I mean, we've already seen several companies with huge layoffs and rearranging their operations due to this. I mean, it's just a little bit more than a year ago that ChatGPT really made the headlines, and now, I mean, look where we are. Yeah. And it's really times for that bold prediction, like having 80% of functionality at 90% or 10% of the cost is also super bold. But in these times, in this age, I mean, having those kind of bold predictions are really, I mean, there's a place for that.
Yes, yes. I mean, and I wish a media company would chime in and say, we will do, say, 80% of the news that the old established media provides at the 90% of the cost. 100% of the same quality.
Yeah, right.
Fact-wise.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, again, like the bar for being a good producer has really gone down. I mean, it's simple to be a great producer of content or services, thanks to these new tools.
And this also resonates very well with a conference South by Southwest last week. They talk a lot about tech, of course, but they don't talk about the actual gadgets. They don't talk about the capacity of NVIDIA CPUs or GPUs and stuff like that. It's rather the consequences of AI in this case, and also putting it in more like a philosophical dimension or context, that what is it being human in this day and age? What will AI and automation drive moving forward?
I'm going to toss in another little prediction there. I mean, economic historians, going to be super important. But next year, a philosopher will stand here.
Yes.
To have him or her prediction. Because I think moral reasoning and judgment, when pattern recognition and information production can be outsourced to these machines, moral reasoning will be a key tool if we're not supposed to like drive down the ditch as a species, I'd say.
What did you hear?
So I think it's super interesting. There's I have two thoughts. So one, of course, these massive B2B companies. There's probably room for a new business model, but at the same time, there's such a latency in the market. I mean, for public sector, for example, having procured software, it will take a long time to to kind of happen. But do you think that they are aware, or do you think these SaaS companies are fat and happy and do not see the change coming?
I mean, it's been a while since I read The Innovator's Dilemma, but if Christensen has anything, if he's still right, one could argue that maybe they downplay this threat, and maybe they are leaning on the fact that, again, humans are buyers, are humans, and humans follow the path of least resistance. To change from using Slack into using, say, Campfire, it's too much of a hassle. It's not worth the pain and the cost cutting. But then again, I think they are underestimating how easy it is to switch services. Just that it's becoming easier and easier for us citizens to switch healthcare providers and banks and so forth. I think that everyone is interested in lower all the kind of bars so yeah. I think they underestimate.
And I mean, different industries will react differently, right? Because and I'm a little bit opposed to maybe, you know, when you say it's possible to see the same kind of development within media, but within media you want news. You don't want old stuff that's based on old data, right? So I think we need to be a bit careful with what we wish for there, not just to reuse and recycle the same old facts over and over again.
Minna, living in SaaS Valley, or maybe soon to be Death of SaaS Valley. What do you see from your perspective?
Well, I think this is super interesting and spot on. But my question will be, first of all, I want to comment. So I don't think the big companies are actually just sitting there and waiting. This is a real AI race, and I think that all the big companies are focusing all the resources to just focus on one thing, and this is it. The other thing, my other reflection is that if you have an AI that actually solve a lot of your problem for a lower cost, what do you think that you pay for? Do you pay with your data, your personal data, on other things? So that is my question to you.
Interesting.
Yes.
I mean, I'm starting to reflect by myself on how much data we put into. We use different GPT models, and I wouldn't. I mean, I'm a psychologist, so I can't read like a legal text for. But I'm starting to really think, okay, what are we really like? What are we really doing, or what is OpenAI really doing with this data? Because I mean, we've 5x our productivity since the past year, and it cost us $25 per employee. But again, like, what else do we pay with? I mean, must have some kind of, either they don't know anything about pricing at OpenAI, or I'm providing something else besides like $25 a month that is really valuable to them. Oof, I don't want to even think about it.
Yeah. And what are we paying with? It makes me think about our brain data, and but that's another topic. We shouldn't go into that. That's might maybe not be for Foresight Wednesday in a month or something, or in 2 months.
Who knows?
Minna, over to you. This is the segue to you, and your 5 minutes. Stage is yours, please.
Thank you, Joachim. And Foresight. Foresight is not just prediction, as Joachim described in the beginning, but it's a possible future we can choose to shape. So my foresight today will be on the future of AI businesses. I have had the privilege of spending most of my career in the intersection between Sweden and Silicon Valley. So this foresight is based on picking brains of brilliant minds in Silicon Valley, talking to people from large companies such as Google DeepMind, Meta, NVIDIA, but also fast-growing AI startups and researchers. In Sweden, the AI era have for some people seemed very sudden. It exploded with ChatGPT, and now it's on everyone's mind. In Silicon Valley, on the other hand, I have witnessed the development of AI quietly growing in the past 8 years. So what are the key success factors to build a scalable business? And how is it possible for startups to compete with large billion-dollar companies? A decade ago, there would be no better place to answer these questions than in Stockholm, a city with the highest number of unicorns per capita in the world. Fast forward to last month, where we witnessed a groundbreaking moment. The first AI engineer, Devin. This AI not only built a product, but it also autonomously improved the software, it identified errors, and published a web page. At the same time last month, we also saw that there is more AI written code on GitHub than code written by the human hand. So what is needed to build a scalable AI business? I will say 4 things. The first is competence, and competence attracts other competence. AI researchers can now focus on deep diving into forefront AI research based on the available research on AI, but also resources available. Compute power. So it's not free with compute, and you can see it by NVIDIA's exponential growth. So we have compute capabilities now that we never seen before. And this process makes it possible to process a huge amount of data and to solve very complex tasks. And data for training. High quality data is essential for training AI and improving accuracy and performance. And last, the Silicon Valley network with its culture and ecosystem. And all these factors require substantial funding. So coming back to nothing is free. Which brings us to the question, how can startups compete with large corporations? Many founders of small and fast-growing AI startups have deep expertise in AI. They have often worked at a few of the big companies and their AI labs, like Mistral in France. They worked at Meta and Google DeepMind. Anthropic worked at OpenAI before. And we have the Coher in Toronto. They worked at Google Brain. But why do employees with lucrative stock options and 7-digit salaries in Silicon Valley leave to start their own businesses? Well, I see other signs and trends as well. Ethical and open AI development, transparency index, and the realization that creating a world-leading AI startup is actually not only possible, but it's impactful. These serves as powerful motivators. I envision an even more extreme future where large companies armed with immense competence, compute, power, data, and funding will continue to grow even bigger and expand. But at the same time, we will see startups with only a few employees driven by strong visions, open, transparent, and ethical values and approaches. They will emerge and excel to billion-dollar companies being only a few people. Germany, the UK, and France, they're all home to rapidly growing AI startups. So my question to all of you and to the panel is, how can we in Sweden shape our future to reclaim our position and become the country with the most unicorns per capita once again, but now in AI?
Thank you, Minna. So interesting to hear this. On my notes to-do list, I need to check out the NVIDIA presentation of their new processor. It sounds like underlining also that we need to learn a little bit more of tech. Everyone needs to learn a little bit more of tech and understand what does that mean, that piece of hardware. Anyways, I think it's really interesting, the ethical parts that you're underlining here. And do you see a transition from like hunting the big bucks and buyout or stock market, being on the stock market? Do you see a trend towards being more aware of the ethical dimensions given AI and also as an entrepreneur, that ethical values are driving more than economical.
Yes, so I will say that the really forefront AI startups are usually founded by very good AI engineers. And what is important for them, talking to people in Silicon Valley, is, according to me, actually, usually not the funding or your salary. It's the interest of doing something else. They are nerds, they are researchers, they want to create impact, and they usually have very good ethics. So sometimes when they see that companies only have one thing in mind, which is to collect as much data as possible and to grow as fast as possible, that is not exciting. And sometimes some people, not everyone of course, but only a few, they decide to leave and to do something else. And for really, really good engineers to attract other engineers into this, I see that is a big trend. But for example, sometimes that could change. OpenAI started as open with very ethical values, and then that changed when they saw the opportunity to earn money. So
and also stimulating the collaboration between Nordic or Swedish startups and Silicon Valley. Do you see that? What can we bring to the Silicon Valley buffet?
Yes, so as a startup, if you're really good at AI and applying AI, especially in fields that we are strong in Sweden, we have some areas where we have really good expertise in healthcare, in the automotive industry, and in manufacturing. So we do see a few startups that are really, really forefront and that have worked very closely with the problem and that knows these industries, applying the AI to that, and then go to Silicon Valley to expand, grow, get venture capital, and building a network that I have seen that is very impactful. So we can bring the domain knowledge to the table.
Interesting. Ylva, do you have any comments?
So many thoughts, and it's super interesting. I'm wondering why Silicon Valley, these good intended Silicon Valley engineers don't move into public sector. Because if you really want to benefit society for the better, that's the task of the public sector. So I hope you're right. I'm divided. I think there's that trend. There's that trend of maybe especially among young people. At the same time, I mean, what is impact? What is positive impact? We just joined NATO. I'm involved in Vinnova's new program for civil military synergies, and you could argue that positive impact is the ability to save democracy in the long term by now putting more money into defense. So it's really difficult, and I still believe, I'm not convinced that talent will move where it should be. I think talent will continue moving into where the money is. But I hope I'm wrong. maybe you have a different view.
I thought it was a. Oh yeah. Minna can comment first. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. So what I think is that as a researcher, you need a lot of funding to be able to train. You'll need data, and then you need a lot of funding to be able to have the compute to train your AI models. You need to have a researcher to discuss with, and you need a few other things, which is unfortunately not common in public sector. However, if you start a startup, you get venture capital funding, you can focus on only one thing, and that is to make your research and to be forefront in that field. If you base it on open values and ethical values and build in that into your software, I think you can have a big impact on the world. However, I do have a close friend that actually left one of the big ones and moved to ARPA, which is one of the public funding agencies. So that do happen sometimes.
Yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting question Minna posted at the end. how can Stockholm once again become like the unicorn? I think it's a unicorn is such a like easy to communicate concept, and it's also like a concept and a goal that I'd say myself subscribe to. I think it's a lovely fact that Sweden provided so many great internet companies back in the days. But your question just triggered so many other questions in my head, and I would like to have a long with a long conversation with economic historians, which we cannot do now. But again, I'm just starting to wonder what was the basis back in the days that laid the ground in this unicorn phenomena back in the days with Spotify and Skype and Klarna and all those other iSettle and so forth. What was because I mean, one can think that we had very accessible technology, as in like our 3G system was built out fast. We had a lot of internet.com boom companies, perhaps. And then one also starts to think about like what makes a country appealing is like our welfare system. And as far as I can see, that hasn't changed a lot. But I wonder like if that is the like most interesting foundation on what like unicorns start popping up, or is it like access to great universities? Yeah, I'm just like I got so many questions in my head, and I really want to find a good answer to your excellent question.
Yeah,
like what do we need to be in place so that we can take advantage of this new boom with AI technology.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Any final reflections, Minna?
Yes, so I have also been thinking about this a lot, and I have been comparing, because a lot of people in the US says that it's not possible in Europe to compete because of the regulations. But now we have seen that, for example, in French, Mistral has been growing very, very rapidly. So that shows that that's not the case. It is possible. But I have also been thinking a lot on what can we do to actually make sure that Sweden is forefront. And as a person, we got a lot of questions actually at CES in Las Vegas in January. Should we start a subsidiary in Sweden or in France? So we took the opportunity and invited a few of the most forefront companies from Silicon Valley within AI software to Sweden. So they will come in April, and we will do a roadshow and events and a few things to actually try to form this future together. So if you're interested in being a part of this, please contact me. Otherwise, I encourage everyone to try to do what they can to change this. And I'm so proud about when we were the most unicorns per capita in Stockholm. So let's do that together.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Minna. And just once again underline the fact that we decide what kind of future we want to create together. So get to work, get going on the action part. Minna, thank you very much. Ylva, Niklas, thank you very much for your interesting presentations. Thank you for watching. Next Foresight Wednesday is April 17th. You will find the details on vinova.se regarding that. It will be in Swedish. Maybe we'll subtitle it automatically in English. Who knows? Next up on Sweden Innovation Days is Introduction to the Swedish Innovation Ecosystems and Fundraising Agencies. I will follow that one myself. I always need a refresh on that. And then at 2 p.m. The main stage program will begin with Ebba Busch and with many interesting bits and pieces there. So thank you very much for watching Foresight Wednesday. See you in a month.